Okay. Well, we're really thankful that you're here. Glad that you decided to come and check this workshop out. We call it the Show Me the Elephant Workshop because when we first started with our anti-racism work, and that was about 2005, right? And we went to training and learned a lot in a couple of years. And when we started doing the workshops, the subject of racism is not it's not an inviting, oh good, we're going to go listen to that. So we just found that it was kind of difficult sometimes to communicate what our workshop was about, and that it really isn't just a negative, it is anti-racism. But we decided to call it the Show Me the Elephant Workshop because I had heard the expression of there's an elephant in the room. Has anyone ever heard that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And so if you haven't heard that, it's when there's a problem, a really big problem, and it's within a group of people, maybe in a family, and nobody seems to see it, even though it would be like having an elephant and everybody walking around it. So that's kind of how we feel about racism. And in Helena, we have a trail called the Show Me the Horse. It's a running trail. My husband is a runner, and so he would go out there to run, and he'd say, do you want to drop me off at the Show Me the Horse? And I just thought, that should be the name of our workshop. And so Sean said, well, whatever. But we were trained for the anti-racism work through our church, Christian Church Disciples of Christ, and we learned about racism and its power in our lives and how we can begin to dismantle it. Because we find most people really don't, like it, don't want it, and don't really know how to go about changing it. So, anything else, Sean, you want to throw in there?
Well, just quickly, on my end of the deal, okay. On my end of the deal, Barb came to me in 2003, I believe it was, with the idea of being a part of this team. And prior to that, I'd never been to the First Christian Church. I was raised in Southern Baptist Church, one very similar to this, and food is as good as as it was today. And so. But I had never sat on a committee in church or anything like that. The only thing I went there for was there was food, and then I knew I should have been there on Sundays. Duty calls. But to actually talk about racism in church was really confusing to me. I never really thought of it. I was brought up believing, things are in stone, this is the way it is, this is the way it always will be, and so forth. So it's been a really eye-opening experience for me. I left the Southern Baptist Church, went to United Methodist Church, and then came to First Christian Church after I'd been coming to the board meetings for a number of years to talk, since I sat on this committee. But I didn't take to the idea real well because I didn't decide when I was growing up or when I was really young that I wanted to spend my life talking about racism. Is there anybody in here who would want to go around the state talking about racism? I mean, honestly, it's not the kind of thing you want to do. But there is such a need. It is, I think, something that the God that I believe in, wants us here and working not just by myself, but as a team with Alan Schreiber and Barb Lancaster and many of the other ones around the state. So this is a group effort, and we're all in it. And so I'm glad to be here today. And really enjoyed everything this morning.
So we're going to start out, and I have a script here that we worked on, and I'm going to try to stay closely to it. Sean is too. We kind of try to keep each other on so that we have a lot of material to cover. And so we try to stay with our agenda so that we can get it all done in the amount of time that we have planned today. So we're going to kind of keep things moving along. And we've planned each section of it very closely. So we'll be using the script to kind of keep on track here. Because I don't know if you guys have ever heard it said that racism is either talked about in shouts or whispers. And so today we're hoping that we won't have either of those, but that we'll have good, open, honest discussion on the subject. And the purpose of our time together is to explore an understanding of racism and to encourage you to join us in the long-term task of dismantling racism. So, but first we have another little thing here we're gonna do. So I'm gonna just turn this over to Sean. Introduction. Did I skip something?
Oh,
Yeah.
we're gonna take a quick few minutes, and I think we were gonna have you say your first name and what you gave up to be here today. Okay. If you're comfortable with that, please feel free.
I'll start.
Okay.
Okay. And I'm Barb. I guess I didn't introduce myself when we started. But if I wasn't here today, I would be home out in my yard because it's so beautiful out. Right. Would be fun to do. So do you want me to do you think we need to do that? Or we'll just have you do it. We won't make you talk into the mic. Okay? So
Throw it back with.
what would you be doing today if you weren't here?
I've been watching sports.
I'm Helen Bagwell, and I'd be home walking the dogs is where I should be right now.
I'm Joanne Hanger, I'd probably be taking a nap.
John Hanger. I'd be watching sports if I could keep my eyes open.
Nancy, and I'd probably be reading a book.
Betty, I'll probably be working on my genealogy.
Melanie, probably out for a walk and then taking a nap.
Ed Wassinger, I would probably be trying to take a nap.
Shirley Wassinger, I'd probably be reading the paper and then taking a nap.
I'm Dale, probably be watching sports.
I'm Shirley Bartlett. I'd either be quoting or reading the paper.
Dan Ward, I'd be reading, listening to the sports.
I'm Fred, yeah, Sunday news, football.
I'm Marie Hall, and I'd be cleaning up my mess from Sunday school.
Gene, I'd probably be taking a nap at one of the first things, and I don't know what I do.
I'm Pat Fairchild. I'd probably be picking my house up because we've had company the last 2 nights and packing my suitcase because we're leaving Tuesday for New York.
Yeah. I'm Connie Grace, I'd probably be either sewing or reading.
And I'm Margaret, and I would probably be cleaning up because we've been gone a lot.
I'm Alan, I'd be reading.
I'm Sis, and I should be doing things, but I'd probably be taking a nap.
Nap is the most popular one.
I'm Charles, I'd probably be looking for things I've been lost in the movie. And also reading the paper.
I'm Margaret, and I'd probably be at home watching TV.
I'm Linda, and I would be with my Red Hat group today. We're having a big party. And then I would be on the phone to my friends in Butte.
Okay, oh,
I'm Nancy, I'd probably be doing church book work that needs to get done.
okay, well, I'm Sean, of course, and I would be in my office working, trying to figure out what I'm going to be doing tomorrow. That's what I do quite a bit every day. I produce a show called Native View that also airs here in Missoula on the NCAP station, and it airs in Helena, it airs all over the state, also in Alaska, and in January we're going to be airing all over the country, from New York to Florida to California on a national line. So we're gearing up for that, and it takes a lot of work. But it's exciting. We'll be talking about American Indian issues, interviewing people and things like that. So And it is one of the first in the country. There have been other shows that have started and have not been able to make it as long as we've been consistently. We're on 5 days a week, basically. So we're really pushing forward. What we're going to do today is we want to keep moving ahead. I keep forgetting I'm supposed to read a script or stick to a script, but we wanted to go over what our goals today are. And over here we have number one. The first is to define a racism and explore our understanding of it. Now there's a whole variety of racism categories, you could say. But we're going to talk about institutional racism today. And that is going to be, we're going to kind of cut it a little bit, or keep it in that area. The second one is to explore a faith-based understanding of anti-racism, and 3 is to introduce the work of our anti-racism team and invite you to begin your own journeys in learning or studying or even looking at the newspaper. I've heard a number of people read the newspaper, and I read the newspaper every day. I read Indian Country Today, Indians.com. I read a ton of Indian news all over to see what's going on. And I also read the Helena Independent Record, the Missoulian, the Billings Gazette, you know, and see what's going on in other communities. So that's where we are.
Because we prepared this chart because we do have a lot that we're going to be discussing. And like Sean said, we're going to, you know, we have it planned. We've got, we're going to talk about institutional racism a lot. So there may be a lot of topics that come up or some topics that come up that we're just going to put on this chart for further discussion. So just wanted you to know that that's going to be there also. So we'll just start out by recognizing that racism isn't always easy to discuss, so we just would like to have an agreement on a couple of basic principles. So we're asking that this can be a safe place today for discussion. So a place where we will listen to one another with respect and without judgment. And then secondly, that we will be open to new ideas and that there are no wrong answers. Are no wrong questions. Excuse me, I better stick with this. No, there really are no wrong questions as we discussed today. And we hope there will be lots of questions that will come up that we can discuss. So do you think we can agree on those two things, that we will not judge one another and that there are no wrong questions? Looks like we got it. So we believe that racism is not part of God's design for creation, and that the motivation and guidance to understand and work against racism comes from our faith and our spiritual strength. And we will ask you later in the workshop to reflect on how your faith has helped you to interpret and understand racism. So to get started, we'd like you to share just with another person at your table, and that's why it's nice to be close to someone else. You don't have to get up and move around too much. One time that you were affected by racism. So think about a time that you remember being affected by it. And one way that you think racism in our state right now is being combated. Okay? So we'll just give you a couple of minutes to discuss those two questions. One time you remember being affected by it in some way, and how you think it's being combated in Montana. Okay? I'll just say good. So we'll do this to you now.
Yeah.
Well, I went around for a long time. And I never thought, I should have told him he had a big hump in his. But I mean, you know, it just, it's strange. Of course, being white and all, discrimination.
We were, my father raised me young. And one time I got in a fight with another black boy who came from my office. Who said, I don't like that. You know,
The secret to the
you're older than me, built like Probably he's stronger than most people.
I don't feel, it affected me the opposite way from where he
Well, I realize that
I suspect that I caught myself
This is really fun, yes.
Well, there's there's quite a few people in the station. Maybe one more minute.
They make guidelines. No, they make guidelines.
Kind of expected though. I mean, actually it's, this population we want to talk to. So it's, but you don't have to educate minorities about racism. Okay, have you had a chance, everybody, to kind of get an idea of some experiences of this topic? I always have a hard time saying the word. It's such a negative word, and I don't really like to spend most of my life talking about negative things, but it is something that we got to talk about and confront as honestly as we can and move forward. So that was kind of a little warm-up session. So this is a quick response question. So can everybody hear me okay? Okay. Here, let's see, some of us here are old enough to have been around in the 60s. Others of us are too young to remember the 1960s. However, whether we were around or not 50 years ago, most of us are aware of the impact that the civil rights movement made in our nation in the 1960s. I want to ask if you think racial conditions in Montana have changed for the better or for the worse in the past 50 years. If you think they are worse now, if you think conditions are better now than they were then, raise your hand. Okay. We got quite a few here. If you think they are worse now than they were then, raise your hand.
I think you've driven it in the ground. People, no, you can talk all you want, but they're still racist. You might not say they are, and you might not admit it, but they're, a racist is a racist.
So raise your hand.
So is that a hand for a?
No.
You said not, he said Montana.
You said Montana, and I'm not.
Oh, okay.
I wouldn't have the slightest idea, because, but you're saying you've driven it into the ground. It's underground.
But your question is, it is not worse.
Okay, that's our next stop. If you wanted to raise your hand both times, raise your hand. And of course, if you didn't raise your hand, you can raise your hand now. But with that person sitting next to you, can you name one example of how conditions are better now than they were 50 years ago? And one example of how conditions are worse. We'll take a couple minutes.
Well, I can tell you one, and I'm going to the United States, which you go in the South now, and you don't have a colored drinking bottle in a white or bathroom, and you can get on the bus and sit any place you want.
That's good. We'll talk about that. Okay, couple minutes on this. One example. We're going to be talking to each other here and then afterwards, and then we'll get kind of a one from each table or something like that. Okay. Are you ready?
You're doing all the talking on these two
Okay, are we ready to move on here? Has everybody had a chance to kind of express something one way and the other, one or the other? Okay, we're going to do a quick chart of better and worse. And we're just going to name a few things that are probably the things that are on top of your mind the most of what is better now than it was 50 years ago before the civil rights.
I think
Go
we
ahead.
can talk about it better now.
Okay.
Communication.
I would say jobs. When I was young, and of course there were black people in my hometown, they always had menial type jobs. You know, they would run the elevators in the department stores, and they were always menial, where now they have jobs like anyone else, and I think that's a real plus.
Okay. Anybody from this table?
I've noticed more dating between the white
So interracial,
and
kind of.
and red. Doesn't matter who they are, of some different race. And I'm one of them.
Used to be a felony to date.
It used to be.
It's not against the law.
No, I know back in the 50s, my first girlfriend was black. And believe me, I got beat up quite a few days.
Yeah. How about this table here?
Education.
Education?
Now, what is your hand up by?
Oh, Barb asked, what do you mean by education?
Yeah, but you want to expand on it a little? How has education changed?
Well, it's open for everybody now.
Okay, so the integration?
And there you go.
Integration,
Okay.
okay.
How about over here? Anybody?
One thing, I think that other races are more prejudiced against white people anymore and consider all white people as being racist, which I don't think is true.
Would that be worse though?
Maybe, yeah.
Okay, so if we want to, we'll save that one and talk about that one then.
Okay.
Okay?
We got a couple more spaces. Anybody else?
Yeah, I'm just speaking for myself. I think it definitely is better in some areas. Fred's from the south, I'm from here. The interaction between, in Montana, it's the prejudice against the Native American culture. In the south, it's against the black. And the sedition, which we just went to in my own home, it was against the Germans out of the eastern part of Montana. So although it is better, I think it is driven a little more underground, is right. It is better, but
Okay.
it's
But
not
let's save that
worse.
one for when we get over here.
It's not worse,
Yeah.
but it is better,
Okay.
but
Better
it still
than-
exists.
Okay, so it's better in which way then?
Better improvement in that interaction,
Better interaction?
Interaction.
Okay.
better tolerance. I would guess interaction or tolerance. It's more
Okay.
tolerant, it's tolerant, but they haven't eliminated it. They tolerate because the laws make them sometimes.
Okay. But there is more tolerance and more interaction? Okay. Any more?
There's probably more tolerance in Missoula than if you went into eastern Montana.
Yes.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
I don't, you know.
Might be
that's-
regional.
Yeah, regional, you hit it right there.
Okay.
Well, I think there's a lot more tolerance because if you hadn't noticed, I'm the only dark-skinned one in here. 50 years ago, would you catch me in a room?
I'm going to put media on there, Sean, because we see more, media is more fair representation. I mean, I just remember when I was growing up, and if you saw an Indian person in a movie, there was only one role most of the time, or any person of color. It was pretty limited where you would see them in movies or TV.
Okay, now we're getting to worse.
Okay.
This one ought to be fun.
The worst, I think, is then driving it underground.
Underground.
And a lot of times we hear that and people will say more subversive. But I can't spell that, subversive.
Yeah.
There we go, I think that's close.
Anybody think it's worse over here, or is there anything specific worse?
Nancy, how would you say what you were talking about? Do you feel like there's more of a backlash or what would you say?
It's just something I've seen personally, yeah.
So how would we, okay, so personal. How would we write that?
It was just my observation. I'd never traveled to the south before, and we were all swimming in a pool, and my daughter and son-in-law and I were the only white people in the pool, and this little boy asked my son-in-law, why are you swimming here? You're white. And it was astonishing to me that they just would assume that we'd be racist.
So we have had people who would say,
Yeah.
they would say that would be reverse discrimination?
Yeah.
Is that a fair
Because he was just
description?
a child and he
What
was
you-
surprised that we were swimming with them.
Okay, so,
It just surprised me too.
Maybe the people that were white there wouldn't swim with them, so they were surprised that somebody white was swimming.
Yeah.
yeah. Okay.
I think somewhat in the job market, it's a reverse discrimination now. Men, instead of being qualified, they're seeking some kind of quota.
Okay, quotas.
And this has been going on the last 30 years, and that's when I first noticed that.
Okay, and that is really complicated, because it creates a lot of tension when we have quotas.
But when you're, you know,
But-
quotas, and everybody talks about it, and I kind of sometimes agree. But don't you feel if a person, and I'm talking to the person that does the hiring, that he kind of feels he's gonna give everybody an equal chance, you say this person's more qualified, this one isn't. But he kind of levels it out and say, quotas, yes, but there's also gotta be human nature involved.
Okay, so this is what we haven't seen, I think, since our first one, that sometimes, quotas can be worse, sometimes they can be better, because otherwise, how will the change happen? I mean, that's why quotas came to be in the first place, right? So I was gonna draw these arrows when we have crossovers, okay?
Well, you know, that brings to my mind regarding quotas, this would have happened when our daughter was in the 5th grade, so that would have been about 1972, something like that, and we lived in Colorado, northern Colorado, and at that time, the quotas came in, and I know they hired quite a group of Spanish, Mexican teachers. And our daughter happened to be in a class where they did hire a man who just was not qualified. And so she suffered because of that quota system, 1 year of having a very poor teacher. And I think he lasted a year and then he was gone. But the quotas, they have to hire a certain number of Mexicans.
That's still true, because I was just talking to my sister in Virginia yesterday. Her son went to apply for a job that just opened up a brand new Lowe's right there by him, and he got hired. Next thing they called him back and said, no, they've hired too many. But she went past the same store, Lowe's, the next day, and it says now hiring Spanish-speaking people only.
So the quotas are still,
Yeah.
okay?
I think the media is one of those back and forth, the better and the worse.
Okay.
Because they tend to make mountains out of molehills.
Right.
And either, a white person can do something and it might be mentioned, but if a black person or another race person does it, it's all over everywhere.
And Linda, you reminded me too, that when we talk about racism, it's another thing that took me a while when we started our training, was the labeling, and the way we discuss it. And so it is difficult because we do have that, you don't want to use the wrong term, and everybody's kind of in a different place. So we kind of have agreed that we would use the terms, white and people of color, or what, I don't think we're going to really offend someone, but I'm glad, we do need to talk about being sensitive to those things too. And sometimes it feels uncomfortable using the words white or, those terms that we have heard them used negatively. But it's okay here that this is what we're discussing. And so we will
I
use
think you find
those
that
to
if you're
identify.
talking, are they Eurasian, are they Caucasian, or are they, Native American? I'm a Native American too, I was born and raised here, So those terms do carry a lot of weight. You call it African American, but, they were born here. They're no different than I am. Or how do you mix them up in Asian culture? Even among themselves over there, they know the difference between the Chinese, the Japanese, the Hawaiian, the yeah, everybody knows the difference. To me, they're all Asian,
Yeah.
within their culture.
Yeah, so it's, yeah, that sensitivity to labeling or, you know, the stereotypes that go with certain things are just a lot of baggage that we have. So,
I worked with a young Asian girl, she, just the cutest little thing, smarter than the whip. She could write down orders there and be writing down her lessons over there at the university. And just one day I was looking for someone to come in and I said, did you see that person come in yet? She's all kind, no, and she's just had the black straight hair like they all did. And she said, oh no, you all look alike to me. My father, when he came from Finland, and we wanted to learn to talk Finn so we could understand what they were saying of course. He said, no, you're an American, you speak English. And that's the way it always was.
yeah, we have heard that, yeah, a lot too, with that.
I went to a school with a person at Vanderbilt University in Nashville, and he was raised in the 60s and 50s, and he was taught, his parents taught him that not to learn anything about his heritage and not to speak Spanish because they were American now, and none of that matters anymore. And so he had a real different kind of outlook or perspective on what everything was about. It was really interesting. I didn't know that.
Well, wasn't it way back when, I don't know when, but if all of the immigrants that came to America were not to speak their native language, and take part in their holidays. They were American and they were gonna do what Americans did.
And some families were very much that way. But I do know some people whose families weren't that way. You know, they really valued their heritage and held on to it, but.
Well, they're going back to their heritage
Quite
now,
often.
but at that time, and I think it was a law.
But what is America? America's a melting pot. When you say you come to America and you're gonna speak American, what part of America are you going to speak? Are you gonna speak the New England states or the South or Texas or the Northwest? What kind of American are you going to speak?
Yeah.
You know, California? We all, even if we're all the same color, we identify your location by the way you speak.
Yeah, yeah.
But
But
it's
you
still
tell the Texan,
English.
It's still English.
but it's not good English and speak, good English. You can get in a lot of trouble.
Okay, so we need to finish up here. Is there anything else that you can think of?
Any other that you want to add on either side, or any other arrows that we need to draw?
Well, what I saw not too long ago was, I was sitting in a restaurant. This couple walked by, black guy and white girl. And these guys says we should go up and out there and beat him up, because he's black, we shouldn't be with her.
And this was in Montana?
That was right here at the restaurant Finnegan's.
Yeah, that's what I found. My ears hear things better these days, because I hear comments like that, and I'm surprised, and I don't know why I didn't hear them
But-
before.
These same guys I saw before sat with a black woman. You know, different.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you'll figure it out, yeah.
Okay, well,
Double standard.
Yes.
All right, so I'm gonna put this over here.
we're gonna move on to a different part here that it's gonna require a little bit of history. This is the fun part. And a lot of you, are there any educators here? Teachers? Great. Anybody else? No? Shirley? Okay, so this is gonna be kind of like a quiz. We're gonna think about history, civil rights history, things like that, so. And so when was the first civil rights legislation passed?
64?
1964? Is this the good year? Yeah, I'd write the question. What year for civil rights laws? Just put abbreviate, yeah, CRL. Okay, any Anybody want to take a shot?
You said a law or?
Civil rights laws. Civil Rights
But
Act.
it goes back to
The
the
first-
Civil War.
Well, that was set for.
Okay, everybody's talking, so I can't figure out who's who.
So we heard 64.
1864? 1964?
Yeah, but that's not right.
Anybody else?
I'd say
Yes, 1960, but I really don't.
1960? Okay, this is gonna be the prize.
I think it's the Civil War, it
I
goes
think
back
so,
to the
too.
Civil War.
Okay, you're right. Goes back to, the first year was 1866. In 1866, Charles Sumner, an African American, and the radical Republicans started advocating the passage of the Civil Rights Bill, legislation that was designed to protect freed slaves from rich Southern Democrats' black codes. Has anybody ever heard of the black codes? Well, these codes were laws that replaced severe restrictions on freed slaves, such as prohibiting their right to vote, forbidding them to sit on juries, limiting their right to testify against white men, carrying weapons in public places, and working in certain occupations. Democrat President Andrew Johnson vetoed the legislation, but Congress went ahead and passed it.
So it was what year?
1866.
Okay.
Now, I'm not picking on Democrats or Republicans. Yeah, history. Okay, question number 2. We got another one. What year were the second civil rights laws passed by Congress?
Maybe that would be the 1960s.
1960s? Okay, we got 1960s here. Anybody else? Any? 1950s?
When was the, no, early 1900s, when was that amendment was passed? That was the
14th Amendment was about 1868, but.
1868, you want to go with that?
Yeah.
You're getting warm. Are you ready?
Spanish-American War.
Spanish-American War? When was that?
I don't know.
1898. No, that's too far off.
Gotta be 89.
It's gotta be, would you say 68? I say after the second, after.
1869.
It would be
Okay.
after the Civil War, right after.
Yeah. Well, it was right after the Civil War. 1875. Oh? Okay, the last biracial U.S. Congress of the 19th century passed the Civil Rights Act of 1875. It protected all Americans regardless of race in their access to public accommodations and facilities such as restaurants, theaters, trains, and other public transportation, and protected the right to serve on juries. However, the Civil Rights Act didn't stand a chance after the Dixiecrats took control of Congress and presidency. But you're closest, so I'm gonna. You win. Okay, next question.
Civil rights, we're talking, well, black, white, and then they went to that.
Yeah.
What about discrimination against women? What about burning women, witches, the state was drowning them?
That's a good question. I didn't go back that far.
That's discrimination against
Yeah.
female and male coming to the city.
I'm gonna put it over here for further discussion, because it certainly is, but it's kind of compounded, because you think of being a woman, and then you think of being a woman of color, so it is another discussion. Well, I'll just put, what about women? And you can, start, we'll leave this here.
I'll include that next time.
Hey.
That's good.
Rights all came in before women had rights.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Now, what happened with it, with that law of 1875?
1875. This is the next question. Got another one. What year did the Supreme Court determine that the Civil Rights Act was unconstitutional? Now, you know it's going to be someplace close to 1875. You want to go with 1876? I heard 85?
Yeah.
1885?
I'd say so.
Okay.
It took 'em a few years to get it.
Anybody else?
Oh, I thought you said, I thought you said different checks.
1900? Okay. Going once, going twice. Okay, 1883. Likewise, elected African Americans, there were 3 in Congress, I think, at that time. They were forced out of their congressional seats, and I can't remember, I think Charles Sumner was beat up while serving, and then he couldn't show up for about 3 years.
On the floor of the
Yeah.
Congress.
What nationality
So,
was he?
what's that?
He was white.
Who?
Sumner.
Oh, no, he was black. Yeah.
Oh, he was,
Yeah.
oh, because there was all,
You're the closest.
I think he was, we're gonna put that before the discussion.
Okay. Sumner was born in Boston, represented Massachusetts, and I can't remember. He was, okay, well, other 19th century Democrat policies, oh, I skipped forward one. Over the next 80 years, Democrats successfully voted down all legislation pertaining to civil rights for African Americans. Now, in Indian country, what happened? In Andrew Jackson, the Democrats found success in federal policy of Indian removal. Does anybody know or remember the year the Cherokee Trail of Tears occurred?
I think it's 75, 1875.
Okay, we got 1875.
I remember that, I've heard of that, but I can't remember what it was.
1903? Okay. Anybody else?
1828.
1828? Anybody? Going once? Twice? 3 times. 1838 and 1839, actually. Yep. So we went really far back. Who guessed
He's collecting.
Fred.
Okay. Other 19th century Democrat policies were to orderly extinguish the titles of Indian land, regulate trade, and civilize American Indians, which is interesting because some of those policies then are still in effect today, if you didn't know that. In 1855, Amelia Quinton, has anybody ever heard of her? Founded the Women's National Indian Association. What we might consider in today's society as the ultra-conservative Republican Christians Women's Organization, Quinton founded the organization because she couldn't stand to see the treatment of American Indians. And it's the first start of the assimilation policies and things like that. Her idea was to educate, assimilate, and give citizen status to American Indians. Okay, so now let's move on to the 20th century. It's getting better. These are just the facts. I'm not trying to politicalize anything. How many minorities have presided over a national political convention in the history of the United States? National political convention.
One.
Oh, this is one for these.
We heard one.
Did you get one? Okay. None?
Are there any?
Every year?
Is that all minority?
Okay, going once?
I know, but how far back?
No?
Go? I mean, years.
Going twice?
What do we have, one?
I think
Somebody guessed one.
we had 0, 1, none, 0. We got 2 zeros and 1 1.
I'll go.
I'll go 1, I think.
One?
Brooke.
Okay. All right,
I'm gonna say 2.
2? The answer is 3. Okay, here's a question for you. And actually, we can give one more since the.
Which one's good? As long as we got 3. I want to.
Yeah. Well, that's the next question. How many think it was the Republican Party? Just raise your hand. How many think the Republican Party had all 3?
Must have been because all the Democrats were
Okay.
against it.
Yeah.
We got a few. How many think it was the Democrat Party that had all three? Okay. And how many think it was a mix of both?
I would say that.
Yeah.
You say that? Okay.
I'm changing.
If you answered the Republican Party, then you are correct. Never has the Democrat Party allowed a person of color to preside over one of their national conventions to date. So who were they?
And Senator Brooks from Massachusetts, he must.
Senator Brooke? Nope.
Douglas.
Douglas? Nope.
Carter? No.
Nope. In 1884, there was a 37-year-old African American named John R. Lynch from Mississippi. In 1968, the Reverend Shannon E. Phillips, and I can't remember where he was from. And the third one was in 2000.
Was it Colin Powell?
Colin Powell.
I'm gonna let you guys look it up. I know, that's mean, but that's part of the whole fun of it, I think. The birth of today's Democratic platform started in 1947. A report by then Democratic President Harry Truman had a report titled "To Secure These Rights," detailed a 10-point agenda of civil rights reforms. Then in February 1948, Truman submitted a civil rights agenda to Congress that proposed creating several federal offices devoted to issues such as voting rights and fair employment practices. This provoked a storm of criticism from Southern Democrats, but Truman stood his ground. And you can find that actually on the Democrat website, the National Democrat website. This is where I got it from. However, it wasn't the same for Indian country. Democrats continued their efforts to enact legislation that created havoc throughout the lives of American Indians, from federal policies of relocation, determination, to the approval of unlawful adoptions of American Indian children from their parents on reservations. Life for American Indians was quite complicated. In 1970, Republican President Richard Nixon reversed and ended most of the Democratic federal policies on American Indians by enacting the self-determination and economic self-reliance policy that still govern the relationship between tribes and federal government today. President Nixon, who is for years during that period of time was a hero in Indian country just for those policies. Today, it's a little bit different because things have changed and history seems to be getting forgotten. Has democratically changed the outlook of the future of American Indians. Also, what a lot of people don't know is that Nixon started the investigations that led to the passage of the Indian Child Welfare Act of 1978. I was born in 1973, and my family was affected. All of us children were, I say illegally, but it was just that the adoptions were never filed with the state. I had a couple different names and birth certificates and Social Security, and just a huge mess. It took me about 20 years of my life to straighten it all out, and then get enrolled in my own tribe. So it was quite a mess. Okay, last two questions. Go ahead.
May I ask a personal question?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so you were raised by a white family then, or?
Yeah, I was adopted off the reservation right after birth. And then I spent my summers going from Lane Deer which is on the Northern Cheyenne Reservation, to Harrison, to Anaconda, and then my schools, I went to schools in Great Falls.
You see, our granddaughter, and most people here know Crystal, her parents died in a fire, and, no, not Crystal's mother's parents died in a fire, and then she was adopted by an Anglo family and lost all touch with her Native American family. And in essence, that's what happened to you. And earlier you said that there was a lot of that.
Yeah.
There must have been.
There was.
Until 78?
Well, it continued on until 80, but there was a federal law that was created in 1978 that gave, I can't quote it verbatim, but it gave more protection to Indian children and to Indian parents, that Because the federal government had a policy from the 1950s, 60s, and 70s that if they took the child, the Indian child, off the reservation, they could save the child from, you know, the alcoholism, abuses, and things like that. And it was a combination of both federal government and churches. So,
But now don't they want to try and have the Indian babies adopted by
Indian families, yeah.
families?
Yeah, and that's a result of the Child Welfare Act, yeah. Okay, quick quiz. And the last two questions, you can have a cup. So this is a Democrat. Barack Obama is the first person of color to be a major party nominee, but he's not the first to be on a presidential ticket, and if elected, he is not the first person of color to serve in the White House. Did that make sense? Do you want me to read it again?
Well, he is the first, I always look at it that way.
I didn't hear you.
You
What?
mean of a high office?
Yep, of the White House.
Well, no, Colin Powell was in there.
No, it'd be presidential or vice president.
So is the question, who was it?
Who was it?
Harding?
We got a Harding. Anybody else?
I just.
Was he a president?
There was talk that he was that, or he had black ancestors.
No,
Tell us.
What kind of cup we got up in there? We'll go a few more seconds.
You can be right.
I know.
Fred's gonna get it.
Come on, Fred.
Aaron Burr.
Yeah, okay. We got Harding and Burr. Anybody else?
Well, Colin Powell, well, he was chosen to be
He worked
president,
it.
but he
Yeah,
declined.
he was working. Okay, so who was the first? Answer: Charles Curtis, a vice president. He was a Kaw Indian from Kansas, elected as vice president under Republican President Herbert Hoover. He served from 1929 to 1933. Okay.
We didn't hear a thing about it.
Last quiz. And this is for a cup.
Charlie remembers me.
Who was the first American Indian elected to the Montana State Legislature?
Oh,
People tell us that you know so much. Come on, who's born in Montana here?
Well, we heard one name. Who did you guys name over here? Bill?
You said it.
Okay, there are. So you can just say, was it Bill Yellowtail?
Okay, we got Bill Yellowtail.
You agree, Charlie?
No. Okay. And here's the answer. Dolly Custer Akers was elected in 1932 as a Democrat legislature. Yeah.
How do you spell the last name?
Well, she had, throughout her life, her name was Dolly Smith, and then Cusker, C-U-S-K-E-R, and then last one was Akers, A-K-E-R-S.
And what year?
1932.
see, that's something.
Okay.
Okay, back to business now.
Oh,
Back
yeah.
to work. We have fun.
So I'm just curious, how many Native American people are in the legislature now? Because I would assume that's better.
After the session, or after the election, assumably probably 10, I think. There's a number running, different ones. Over the history of the state, I think there's been over 20 Democrat Indian legislatures and 2 Republican Indian legislatures. Anybody want to name them? Okay. Racism in Montana is better and worse. We discussed that. We especially celebrate the significant legal changes. However, we still have a long way to go. Racism is built into our institutions and culture today. The popular images of racism in the white community is that it is a personal prejudice. And Barb, this one is yours.
Yeah. Do you want to write here?
All right.
Okay, so we'll do this switch up. Okay. So, this was really an eye-opener for me when we started learning about racism, that there really wasn't a common definition when we first started. I mean, there was a common definition. We looked in Webster's, and so we went, I think Sean went to dictionary.com, right?
Yep.
To look up the definition for racism. And the definition, one of the definitions they had was hatred or intolerance of another race or races. So how many feel that that's that would be the definition you would think of for the definition of what is racism?
Yes, I said, yeah.
Okay. No? How would you define it? Does anybody know the definition or what you think of as a definition for racism?
What is unknown?
What is unknown?
In other words, anybody that's foreign to you, if you live in a community, your race is towards you. I don't care if it's white flag or different flag, brown, you can tell them, but if a white person going into some community, white person going into a white community, if he's an outsider, he's not accepted.
Okay, so intolerance of
Snob.
Okay. Okay, well, what we found, and I think what we find here, is that everybody kind of has a different understanding of what racism would be. And so for me, as a white person, I always felt like you did, that it's an intolerance of another race by someone. And I thought it was just a personal prejudice, that people would judge people by the color of their skin. So how many would think that would be a pretty good definition for racism? Okay, so then when we went to our training, I learned a lot because I had not had a lot of interaction with people of color, being from Montana. And I just, there's just such a division there. It's really hard to get to know people. So when we started visiting, then we found and learned that people of colored communities see racism very differently. They see it as systemic power. Okay, so I was thinking it's personal prejudice. Like I had heard people, discriminate against someone, call them names, even physical violence. I mean, we see it on the news. So that was my perception of what racism is. But then people of color have a different perception, and Sean really helped me understand this. It took me about 3 times. So Sean, can you explain that a little more?
Okay.
Systemic power. Oh, yeah. Okay.
For me, this is the best example I can give. Is a couple of years ago, I went to rent an apartment. I called on the phone. I said, asked the usual questions. The landowner said the deposit is $400, and the conversation, hung up the phone. I went to visit the apartment and meet the landlord, and was told the deposit was $500. The cost to me, is an extra $100, and it puts fear inside of me, do I want to do this? Do I want to be here? Do I have can I be here? Things like that. Yeah, I guess that's about the best.
And then soon after that, when we had this definition and I started to really understand that as a white person, and as many white people were indicating that we had a really different definition for racism, that it was just personal prejudice. And then there was an article in the paper that in Montana, the discrimination HUD did a survey and found that quite often people in Montana, like higher than other states, were discriminated against because of their name. So an Indian sounding name would also create a higher price or an apartment that might not be available, and just the things that are built in within systems. And so we started looking at those schools, hospitals, different places that really affect the well-being of a person of color. That quite often that is, that was the real, where the power of racism came in. Okay, so does that make sense then? That there were two understandings of what racism is. So we decided, we didn't decide, we learned within our training that what we needed was a common definition. So to have a common definition that everyone could understand and really start to see it, that it's a bigger thing than we thought it was. That racism is race prejudice plus the power of institutions and systems, okay? So when we talk about racism today, that's what we'll be using, is that definition. That racism is race prejudice plus the power of systems and institutions, okay? So I'm gonna give Sean the math problem there. And as, I've learned more about it, I see that really is true, that it is, it is really more than just race prejudice. And that's where it really starts to affect people's lives, when there's power behind it and power to control. So
you mean then the power would be the landlord?
Yeah, yeah, and not that every landlord is like that, but within systems, there's just certain ways we do things. And for me, it was difficult as, a member of the church. I found that within our churches, that those systems also have power that's sometimes attached to that race prejudice. And so we started looking at it in our church. We looked at the whole big picture, and we thought that we were very, moving ahead and very progressive and things were better. But when we looked at the leadership within the church system, we found that it was not reflective of the percentage of people of color within our church. That the power at the top of the organization was mostly white. That the percentage was really skewed. And so then our church started looking at it. And so systems, like churches, hospitals, governments, education, have really been doing a lot of things to look at that and see what it is that keeps it out of balance. So, and with our schools in Montana, we know we've put into place the Indian Education for All. And, does anybody know how many years it took for us to start acting on that bill to require Indian education for everyone? Over 30 years. And so just in the last 2 years, it's finally, the kids are starting to get books that are, more accurate about Indian education. And it's just really good. So it's good to see those changes coming. So now we have a video, is that right?
Yeah, and I just wanted to say real quick that this next segment, we're going to take a look at this video. I think Barb can describe it. I'll plug it in. But as Reverend Dr. Michael Kinnaman said this morning, that we have to confront racism honestly, directly, and most importantly, in Christ's spirit of love and reconciliation. And that's what we're going to be talking about next. To the rest of the show.
And before, we're going to take a break. We're going to let you guys get up and walk around before we have the video. We didn't bring the popcorn, but you're just going to take a break. And when you're having your break, if you want to talk about some of that, that systemic racism, if you can think of a time that you have heard of or an example of what systemic racism would be when it's within a system, you can share that with your table when you come back from your break if we're not all back yet. Okay? So thank you. You'll notice we put some packets on your tables, and we have pencils here too if you need some pencils or some pens. But we'll talk about these packets a little more, but there is some paper in there, so you can take notes if you'd like to. Because our purpose today. Is this still on? Our purpose today isn't to make sure that you understand and agree with everything you hear, but it's just to help you to put before you the reality that racism has not gone away. and that it has changed and gotten deeper in some aspects. So it is our hope that with this brief look at racism, that that this will encourage you to dig deeper and to build a common understanding and analysis of racism in our community. So we just want to help bring real life-giving changes. We believe that our faith calls us to work for justice, to name the evil of racism, and to hold up a vision for a more just society where all people can live in peace. So we have a video today that demonstrates the things we've been talking about. It is really a good illustration of what systemic racism is. So as we work with that definition and an understanding of, how racism is perceived by people of color and whites differently, this video should really help.
Reflecting back on what our definition of racism, of the institutional racism that we're talking about today, do you remember, or do we need to mention it again? I think I'll pull this back over here. It's on the bottom here, so it might be a little. It says, I guess you can read my handwriting. Racism plus race prejudice plus power of systems and institutions. Now, after watching this video, does this sound a little bit more like what we're talking about here today, or do you have any comments?
It does, but I question, we aren't all like St. Louis.
That's what I was gonna say.
Okay.
I never lived in St. Louis. My sister went to nurses training there in the late 50s. And I know at that time it wasn't safe for these young white nurses in training to be in that part of St. Louis, that they were told that they couldn't leave the school, the hospital, in less than groups of 6 because it was black area and they weren't safe. So then I'm thinking, well, Montana isn't St. Louis. And then I'm sure we're bad, but I'd hate to compare us to St. Louis.
Okay.
That's just an opinion.
That's a good comment. Anybody else?
I agree with that too, because I was watching, I thought, we lived in St. Louis a few years ago, and I thought, St. Louis is a bad, yeah.
I think along with the, you can say it wasn't safe to go into black areas, there are rednecks, where a black person wouldn't want to be caught in a certain area where there were rednecks, so, it goes both ways.
So very, very segregated communities.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
Go ahead.
I'm not sure that we're always aware. I've grown up in Missoula, and those that have been around have remembered Naseby Reinhardt, very well-respected athletic trainer at the University of Montana, and his family in Missoula. I grew up going to school with them. For most of us, we respected them just so thoroughly. They were the children, everybody. It wasn't until years later I found out they couldn't shop. They didn't shop in Missoula because of the racism. They had to go to Spokane, where there was a larger community of black people, to do their shopping, because what they encountered in the Missoula general community when they tried to shop in stores. I was oblivious to it, and probably oblivious to a lot of other things that happened. But that was a real shock, because among my peers, or at least those that I respected, they were very well respected people. And I think in the larger community, they were very well respected.
Okay.
But we only had 2 black families in town, So, I mean, it was, went over our heads, I guess, for some of us.
Yeah.
I'm
Comment?
thinking of something else that might be more prevalent in Missoula if I were a car salesman, and I can imagine seeing it, And I guess I'm a little prejudiced, is why I could see it. But the people in our community with the body piercing, you know, if I were a salesperson and somebody came in with 2 nose rings and a chin ring maybe, and a belly button ring showing, I would be prejudiced. I hate to say that, but it just throws in another little wrinkle.
Yeah.
It would be interesting to see it. I just mentioned briefly the study that HUD did in Montana, and it was 25% of the time, I think. It was Montana, Wyoming, and another state close, that people experience discrimination because of their race. So it's hard to, it's just hard to grasp that. You don't really think it's going to be.
What about our jails and institutions, like the youth jails? I forget what they call them.
I haven't visited there recently.
Yeah? Well, let me tell you about it.
You find it in a lot of areas, and I go back to women again. I applied for a job as a freshman in college here in Missoula, and I was turned down at a local savings and loan because I was young and would be getting married, and I would be leaving the job, and I'd have children, and I'd have to leave, and I was discriminated because of that possibility that I was a female that would. And then after some 30 years later, maybe, or 20 years later, I got a divorce. And I was a single mother raising children with a good paying job. And I went to a car dealership to purchase a newer car, and I'm looking around at all that he's showing me, and I finally look at a more expensive one, and he said, maybe you should go home and discuss it with your husband. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
You might want to look at something more affordable. You can see I didn't buy cars from them, and I had a teenage daughter with me one time. We were buying her a car, and the salesman pulled one of these, and I was so mad I walked out here and poor little girl.
You know, it's interesting.
It just among many different things. I'm sure that men can probably find this. I discriminate when I go to the hospital once, and I find a nurse who's a male nurse, an excellent male nurse. He's a 3rd generation male nurse. I didn't grow up ever seeing male nurses when I was, and he was a 3rd generation male nurse.
Yeah.
I was shocked.
Yeah, I would be.
I mean, I was shocked. I can't
you
say
get used
discriminated.
to it. If you're hurt, you don't care what they are.
Okay, well, that's good.
It is shocking when you see blatant prejudice of any kind or discrimination. But it's just, is it there when we don't see it?
Well, it stares me in the face when I don't think, I wouldn't want to consider myself as prejudice, and yet when I confront a situation like this, and I don't think it's prejudice, but it's very definitely a shock because they're out of what I consider the male-female roles in life. Or what I used to consider the male-female roles in life.
I thought it was interesting when I was reading about the 1875 Act, Civil Rights Act, that it didn't include women in that act, and it excluded Indians in that act too. But it was, it really kind of makes you think how things are quite a bit different. But we believe that addressing racism is a faith issue, and that we can hand this over to Barb, because that's where she was supposed to. All right. Gotta read my own notes. So we were going to take a moment and brainstorm some passages, I think, or how did we word it? The traditions and things that you grew up with that are would make you
Teach about how to deal with racism.
Teach you how to deal with racism. And we're going to we'll put some of these up on the board. It could be anything that if you remember growing up in I think of an example. There's like a song that I can't put my name on it.
Well, Jesus loves the little children. You know,
Yeah.
a lot of kids heard that when they were little, and that was, you know, that's really questionable these days if it's politically correct. But things from our faith and our culture that we could turn to help us when we're trying to deal with racism. Can you think of some lessons or some things that would be helpful in instructing us in how we should be treating each other and caring for every person?
With love, it doesn't matter who they are.
Okay. Okay, with love, it doesn't matter. Okay.
Respect.
Respect one another, maybe, or, okay, and what is the golden rule?
She said that yesterday, and I was like, what? What rule? I never heard it.
You do know that? Come to Sunday school. Do unto, that teacher Lois Hanger was my Sunday school teacher, and she always had us put on our golden rule gloves.
Oh.
I could visualize them as yellow gloves, you
Yeah.
know? Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Remember the old-fashioned gloves where you would button them in?
Oh, yeah. Okay. So did that get some other ideas popping out there?
I think of Paul, and when he talked about there is neither Jew nor Greek,
Okay.
male nor female, it sort of takes out everything.
Yep.
Slave or free, right?
Yep. Neither Jew nor Greek. Okay. Any others?
What was that little song you were just singing? I think it's one that we use in Sunday school. Jesus loves the little children. All good children of the world.
Yep.
Red and yellow, black and white, all are precious in His sight. Jesus loves the little children of the world.
Okay, I don't know if I can fit all of it on here. I'm going to put Jesus loves. And, okay, and how about when God created, I know that's the biblical, you know, in Genesis.
Do you know, you just
God
brought
created
up a
him.
point that irritates me, and I'll just bring that up. And we're bringing up color. We're talking about colors of people. If you've seen a crime committed, and the policeman is asking you to describe that individual, are you going to say he didn't have black hair, curly hair, he isn't this color, he isn't that color, she isn't who she is? What are you going to say? It's just a person? What color are their eyes? What color is their skin? What does their nose look like? Fat, black, blue, but was he a tan one? Was he a dark brown one? Or is he really black? My grandson is very, very white. If I have to describe, and you're looking for my grandson and he's been abducted, what are you going to describe it? How are you going to tell somebody what he looks like? Who are you going to tell them? If
And-
you don't describe who that individual is. He's always got a smile on his face. He loves trucks. This is
So.
where you're going to find him.
And so that is brings up the, well, it takes us kind of back from where we are here, but the invisible, you know, it's kind of like the elephant in the room and ignoring a problem. You can also ignore a person's color, and that's just, you know, as bad. It's like you know, if somebody was describing me and they didn't say I had red hair, I would think, did they not look at me? No, I mean, it's not too red anymore, but it was, you know, it's part of who you are. So when people say, I don't even notice if someone's a black person, or I don't even notice, well, you're not, you know, you're not recognizing them for who they are. I mean, it's, you know, people value who they are too, and we need to just value one another. So that's that respect. Any others?
You know, I saw All in Once, an advertisement just a few days ago on TV by, I think it was called Human Rights, Youth for Human Rights. And in it, first of all, they showed pictures of children, all kinds of children, different colors, and races. And the question was, what child was born free? You can't tell. I mean, it was a beautiful, beautiful thing, and it was just fascinating to watch. And then it was Youth for Human Rights, and it was all these children.
Yeah, because they were all
Yeah.
beautiful, yeah. Okay.
So if we're to continue working on dismantling racism, it's important that we continue to seek guidance from our history and our faith traditions. We learn from them in so many ways that racism is not a part of God's design. And as Kinnaman said, I keep repeating this, but I think it's one of the best ways to say what we're trying to say without, getting too far in the negativeness of all this. Is what we're trying to do is to confront racism honestly, directly, and in Christ's spirit of love and reconciliation. I think you're our page.
We just skipped a page, just to have them discuss a little bit. Yeah, as we look at the list that we had, I'm sure that you will think of some others that are passages that could teach you about how to deal with racism. So if you want to, just at your table, we already had some really good discussion, so I don't know if we need to discuss at your tables. But maybe just, did anyone have any others that you thought of that we didn't write up there?
I always think of the song, "In Christ There Is No East or West."
Yeah, that's a good one. And okay, Nancy?
I lived in Greece for a long time, and it's really human tradition for one race to hate another, but the Greek people hated the gypsies. And I remember one time there was a gypsy woman trying to carry this heavy iron bed down the street, and everyone was just watching her, and I was the only one that ran out to help her, because she was really killing herself trying to carry this heavy iron bed, and they just wouldn't because she was a gypsy.
Uh-huh.
And I don't know, it's just,
Yeah.
it's the human tradition, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I was watching this video a few nights ago about, well, I didn't go into great detail. I talked about the Irish in the early 1900s and then immigration into New York and the persecution basically that they had to go through during that time period. And I can't explain it myself. I don't know very well, but yes, they beat them up pretty good. And
Well,
said a lot of
today,
things.
with Arabs,
Mm-hmm.
here in the United States, anyone who is a Muslim or an Arab, or, they're just immediately connected with the word terrorist, so.
Yeah, and that fear.
It's always gonna be a struggle, just because we're human, to be afraid of someone.
We went through that.
Yeah, and so, so as we work to dismantle racism, and we truly believe we can do it, but it really does take coming together and working through it and recognizing that it is evil and it is still there. And so we just believe that we gain power and strength that we need from each other and from working together and learning more about it. So we have, I think, to look at the packets a little bit. Is that where we're at, Sean? Or we're kind of trying to hurry now because I think we went over a little bit. But
We can go over that.
so, okay.
Next page. Sean.
Okay. So if you want to just look in your packets for a minute, we're hoping that through this today that you would make a personal commitment to learn more and to explore more about racism today and to work against it. So we put these resources together, just some of the things that we've learned from. The first few pages are from the Christian Church Disciples of Christ, and there are a lot of websites there and places you can go to get more information. And as you look through, you'll see some book lists for reading. And I brought several books here that we have that we let people check out and read if they would like to. There's lots of good videos available too about race. Some of these I got actually from the university library that, I don't know, can you guys go there and check out books? Okay, and videos. This one is one, I don't know if you remember years ago when Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated, there was a teacher that did an experiment with her third grade class. Yeah, and so this is just a more in-depth story of her life and where she went from there, and how strongly she believes in the evil of racism and how we have got to fight against it. So it's really one that I recommend, and Sean too, we've looked at it, and it's a very powerful one.
What I found really interesting about this, her story, is that they didn't go directly, I mean, the people that are racist or whatever you want to say it, they didn't go directly after her. They went after her family.
In her hometown, after she did that.
Her kids, her father, I think they had a business.
That went out.
That's pretty bad.
So there are several of her stories about her work at the university library. One of them is this one, the complete blue-eyed, and then the blue-eyed. And I think the other one is a class divided. And that just shows the historic part of it, what she did with her third graders way back then. But these go into the future and closer to today's work that she's doing. And so there's lots of books available and just so much to learn. And so in your packets also, we just have some information about what's happening. We have a little article about rediscovering a heritage loss. That's the green pages. It's just an interesting one kind of to learn more about what it means to become anti-racist. And then a little bit about the Cobell lawsuit, if you don't know about the Indian Trust Funds, and there's an overview and then some updates on what's happening now with that appeal. And
Native View did have an interview. It's an hour-long interview. We'll be sending it here to Missoula in the next week, I think.
An interview with Eloise Cobell.
Eloise.
So it's
really
very
interesting.
good to watch. And just some other articles and information. Yeah. And then at the back, the yellow sheets are just about some of the laws and some of the things that are happening, some of those statistics in education that just shows the imbalance, within our society. So we would just encourage you to keep this and add to it articles and things that you find that are interesting that you can save and learn from and share with other people. Okay. Then I'm going to hand it to Sean.
And we would like you to consider becoming part of our team. It takes some commitment, and we do travel, but not everybody travels every time or anything like that. But our goal is to really try to learn and explore things and learn more about how we need to combat racism, basically. And to expand our vision and learn things. I was a journalist prior to having the show, and one of the things I loved about journalism is you constantly learn about everything. And so I get a kick out of reading and learning and studying and trying to find facts for the next quiz.
And so finally, we would just ask that, this is a problem that's not just going to go away. We've, a lot of people through the centuries have fought against racism, and it's still with us. So it takes a lot of work, and it's not easy to know which way to go and the best way to approach it. So we would just ask your prayers for our team as we work on it in Montana. And then our last little bit is the evaluation, and it's kind of tucked in behind the notebook paper on the front of your folders, I think. So if you wouldn't mind filling those out, and then if you want to come up and look at the books and see if there are any you want to borrow. And just thank you very much for coming today.
Thank you.
Can I put two things closer to home? If you want to get up to the Pablo Pledge Scrutiny Cultural Center up there, if you've never stopped in that flathead, it's got the round teepee kind of shape, really excellent information displays in there. And then the other one coming up here, PBS, and they're starting to advertise it, is sedation showing on PBS that was developed here in Missoula. And it was a discrimination after World War II or during World War II of German people in Montana, sedition and jailed for being German and essentially speaking out against. So that's on PBS coming. There's a number of those, and there's a little sticker out there to watch for that. Those are two local things you can go to. I don't think I know.
We talk about the quota system and the church, and what is the Christian Church National Organization done on their quota system? Who is running it? Do they have minorities, white? I don't know.
Who's running the church? You
Yes.
mean the IR?
The hierarchy, not now the local. I'm talking about the guys up there sitting in the
Yeah.
the
There's,
suits.
they're, all of the leadership teams are, in our denomination have gone through training, like Sean and I did 5 days of anti-racism training, and trying to recognize that system that holds people in, like, it's almost like a good old way system.
Yeah.
That we're starting to learn about, more about, we've all heard about it, but how it really works when you have people, you have a job that comes available that's a higher up job, but you don't really advertise it as well, even though by law you're supposed to, that you might just hire somebody who's already been working there, and then that's how we keep that system going, that we have to be really open.
Is the church, we've been after this for a long time. What has the Christian church done in Indianapolis to rectify the system? Do they have, I call them suits, I don't want to get this, do they have all white people running?
No.
Minority, what's the percentage?
Ooh, that is a good question.
They got the one minority person there and
No.
99 of the other?
No, it's better than that, but
Yeah.
there's, it takes time.
I don't know what the percentage is, but I
50
do know
years.
that our leader has a different time spent a black person, and right now our leader is a woman. So I mean, they have very carefully tried to balance those types of things out.
And at Cambridge West this last summer, or a month ago, or whenever it was that we were up there, that they mentioned that there were more churches that were cultural or ethnic or something like that than before. And because when I started coming around here, my biggest struggle was that I walked into a very white church. And I personally am not going to become a token Indian for any organization or political or anything like that. And I go back years. The first time when I was in 3rd grade, the teacher said that you got to be proud of your people or something like that. And she was talking about the Mohawks, I think, in Thanksgiving and stuff like that. And I told her, I said, well, those aren't my people. She's like, yes, they are. And I said, no, I'm Northern Cheyenne. I'm from here. And she couldn't quite understand that. We got in an argument, and I went to the principal's office. The director of Indian education in the Great Falls schools, Mert McCluskey, came and handed me a stack of books like this. And I flipped through every one of them while he's sitting there talking to me. And there was nothing about Cheyennes. And so I told him very kindly, I just said, you can take your books back. I know. And he didn't like that very much. But so I have very strong feelings about, where I'm working and what I'm doing. So, and I'm committed to what we're doing and how we're doing it. So I think we're making progress.
You know, what you said was very interesting about the differences in the Indian cultures and tribes. I had the Claiborne, I don't know if you know Louis Claiborne. They lived across the street from me, and his wife, who's since passed away a number of years ago, was head of Indian Studies over here, and she educated me about the fact that all Indian tribes are not alike. You can't lump them into the same thing. And it's just like in Europe, you've got France, you've got Germany. These are different tribes.
Well, even on the reservation, there's Busby, and if you're from Busby, you talk like you're from Busby. 16 miles down the road, there's Lame Deer, and if you're from where you talk like you're from Lame Deer. And I guess I have a Lame Deer accent. I didn't never notice it, but when I go down there, it's pretty noticeable. Yeah.
But that's what I say about the United States, we're the United States, but you can tell by the way you speak, a lot of people,
Yeah.
what part of the country you are. We're just united in a common.
But you can still understand each other.
Well.
Oh,
kind
no,
of,
some
kind
places
of.
in the South, I can't understand. I understand the language.
Nor can make a hearing aid in.
That's right. Well, I invite you to go to the inner city sometime and understand the language of the inner city. Or do I understand the language of the children, the teenagers now?
Oh, well.
So it really comes down to valuing each person. Each person is different and not, falling into that prejudice. And so that's really a lot about prejudice. And so the really tough part is the systems, when it's set up in a certain way and changing it, just like Jean asked about the church. That's really hard when a system is in place and it's been working this way all this time. It's hard to change it. All of our systems are really founded on racism, from the time we, Christopher Columbus landed in this country. Things just started out difficultly, I guess I would say. So, okay, thank you.
How many different Indian things yesterday at the half time at the football game? They had a dance group from different Indian, and I think it was like nations, was it 13 or 14 in Montana?
Yeah.
And they were all on the field doing their own dance. Like, it was very impressive yesterday. You see it, Nick?
There was one Native American that had a head of hair that women would kill for.
You mean one of the dancing?
Yeah.
No, they took off one head or whatever. Oh, we all get yelling, cut his hair.